Today, I'd like to talk about one of the most misunderstood chords in common practice music, the Augmented 6th chord. It's really actually three chords that we're talking about. Three flavors of the same chord, if you will. There's a French, a German, and an Italian, which sounds like the start of a bad joke, but it's not. Before we start to understand the chord, we need to understand a little bit about chord function. In common practice harmony, the entire goal is to start with 1, which is what we call the tonic, go away from 1 for a little while, go as far as we'd like, work your way to dominant, or the 5 chord, and then go back to 1. One of the things that makes the pull from 5 to 1 so strong is the presence of the leading tone. The 7th scale degree is only 1 half step lower than the tonic. This half step has an inherent need to resolve to the tonic, or it leads us to the tonic. So if a half step is the strongest way to lead to tonic, then a half step is the strongest way to lead to dominant as well. This is where we get the idea of secondary dominance. Think of it this way. We're in C major, so C major is our tonic. Now, if we're going to have a secondary dominant, we need to first have a primary dominant. So what's the dominant chord in C major? G major. G leads up to C with a 5-1 motion, but it also leads up to C with this B natural. So, now what if we want to lead to that G major chord in the same way? We'll look for the dominant chord of G major, or the 5 chord, which is D major. Again, D major to G major gives us that 5-1 motion, but the F sharp, which is a member of the D major chord, gives us the leading tone to G. This makes D major the 5 chord of the 5 chord in C major. It's the dominant of the dominant, or a secondary dominant. Secondary dominants can lead to any chord that we want. We could also have a 5 of 6 or a 5 of 4. Either way, those chords work the exact same way, by 5-1 motion and by a leading tone. Okay, great. So that's a pretty strong pull to the 5 chord. But what could we do to make it even stronger? That's where we get augmented 6 chords. Because what's stronger than leading to the dominant by half step? Leading to the dominant by half step in both directions. Like I said earlier, there are 3 main augmented 6 chords: the Italian, the French, and the German. However, theorists disagree widely on where they came from, and they likely have no association with the country they're named after, so don't get too hung up on that. The most important thing is their construction and function, and consequently their resolution. Specifically, their function is to be A, predominant, meaning that it leads to the dominant chord, and B, precadential, meaning that it leads to a cadence. Of course, composers are always looking for new and creative ways to get around that function, but we won't worry about those for now. The Italian is the most simplistic form of the augmented 6 chord. I'll use solfege to spell it out because I think it helps with scalar function, but also because of a mnemonic device. The Italian augmented 6 chord is made up of do, fi, and lay, or Bambi steak. Do, fi, lay. Bambi steak. Okay, so half of you hate me because you're animal rights activist, and the other half of you hate me because it was a terrible joke. I'll let you pause the video right here if you would like to work through some of those feelings. Anyway, we have the tonic note, which is C, which is usually somewhere in the center of the chord. Then we typically will see a raised 4th scale degree on top and a lowered 6th scale degree on the bottom. The A flat and the F sharp form the interval of an augmented 6th, and that's where the chord gets its name. More importantly though, the A flat and the F sharp are both a half step away from G, which is the dominant. So in terms of resolving this chord, the pitches that make up the augmented 6th resolve out to an octave, and usually the tonic note is doubled, which resolves outward to complete the 5 chord. Here's an example from the beginning of Beethoven's 24th Piano Sonata. The piece is in F sharp major, which is just cruel. Regardless, see how the chord is spelled and then resolved. We have a doubled F sharp in the center, a B sharp on top, and a D natural in the bass. The B sharp and the D resolve outward to a C sharp, and the 2 F sharps resolve outward to an E sharp and a G, which completes the 5 chord. Next we have the French augmented 6 chord, which is spelled the same as the Italian, but it has an added note, the 2nd scale degree, or do, re, fi, lay. The association to France may have something to do with its spelling. There's a scale known as the whole tone scale, which is aptly named because it's made up entirely of whole tones. The scale is completely symmetrical, which is something that the French were completely obsessed with at the beginning of the 20th century. All 4 of the notes in the French augmented 6 chord are in the whole tone scale. The spelling of the French augmented 6 chord makes it completely symmetrical, being 2 tritones separated by a whole step. This creates even more tension that's in need of resolution. Since we already have 4 notes, nothing is doubled in the spelling. Again, the 6 resolves out to an octave, the tonic note resolves down to the leading tone, and the second scale degree is already a member of the 5 chord, so it stays put. Finally, we have the German augmented 6th chord, which is the same as the Italian, except it also has an added note, which is the lowered 3rd scale degree, or Do Me File. Again, with 4 notes, nothing is doubled. But when we go to resolve it, it creates some problems. The A flat and the F sharp still resolve out to an octave like normal. The tonic note should resolve down to a B, but the E flat needs to go down a half step to D. Whoops. Now we have parallel fifths between the A flat and E flat, and the G and the D. So how do we deal with this? Well, composers have come up with some creative ways around it. Mozart's strategy was often to just leave the parallel fifths as they were. This became so common in his writings that theorists have even called it Mozart fifths. Normally though, composers would elect to resolve the German augmented 6th chord by going to a 1 chord in second inversion, which still has dominant function. We'd call this a 1-6-4 chord. So the A flat and the F sharp resolve to the G like normal, but this time the E flat and the C stay the same, creating a C minor chord with the G on the bass. There's one other thing about the German augmented 6th chord. You may notice that if we leave the A flat, the C, and the E flat alone, but change the F sharp to a G flat, well, now we have an A flat dominant 7 chord. So what's the difference between a German augmented 6th chord in C and an A flat dominant 7 chord, which would probably be in the key of D flat major? A few things. First off, spelling in the common practice era is really important. If we have A flat and F sharp, that's an augmented 6th. But if we were to change our F sharp to a G flat, now we have a minor 7th between the A flat and the G flat. Okay, but that seems like it's a bit arbitrary. The difference then is how they function. The augmented 6th chord is more concerned about resolving the augmented 6th, which resolves outward to the dominant. The dominant 7 chord is more concerned about resolving the tritone, which resolves inward to the tonic. Thanks for watching this episode of 2 Minute Music Theory. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe. Also be sure to check out my other channel, Jesse Strickland Music, which is home of all of my compositions. And if you're the kind of person who uses social media, feel free to connect with me there.